Hey, what's up? It's Joe. Welcome to Freestyle Fridays, where I rant about whatever I want for as long as I want. So, might be 5 minutes, might be 5 hours. I've never actually tried that before, but anyway, don't test me. Anyway, if you're in the United States, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving holiday. That was yesterday. Today is the notorious Black Friday, where hopefully, if you're out shopping, getting some good deals, it's time to do it. So, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Speaking of good deals, practicaldatamodeling.substack.com, we have 30% off forever, actually. So if you sign up, you get 30% off. It's not an annual subscription, but you get 30% off for as long as you want. And this also gives you 30% off some courses I'll be launching next year. And you get the free copy of Mixed Model Arts when that comes out this spring. So anyway, shameless self-promotion there, but figured I'd get out of the way early. Now I know all of you will just hit pause in the podcast while you're setting up your subscription. But anyway, yeah, what was it? Last week I was in Europe. What was it? Amsterdam and then Eindhoven. So I gave a talk at ASML, which I didn't know the name of the company. I knew a company in the Netherlands produced these machines that fabricate, the really thin chips for things like your phones and I think computers. And anyway, that's in Eindhoven. That's the biggest company there, I believe. So that was really cool just to meet a lot of the community there. Great turnout. I think it was like 170 people, something like that. So great meetup. Hope to come back someday. And then went to Paris to speak at Forward Data Conference. Shout out to the organizers of that. I think that stands a chance of being one of the best independent data conferences, not just in Europe, but maybe worldwide. It was a great event. So, yeah, and just back in the States, just getting over jet lag and going to be here for a while. No more international travel, at least for a few months. So, yeah, it gives you time to, just, again, focus on just creating stuff, right? I think when you're on the road, it's hard to get the mental bandwidth to create. I find a lot of time to write, but recording podcasts is always hit and miss because you just don't know, how the things like Wi-Fi and logistics are going to be. Like, so this, last Friday I skipped because I was taking a train. Where was it going from Eindhoven to Paris? And yeah, Wi-Fi on the train was pretty much non-existent, and then the train broke down in Brussels, so we had to wait, and just kind of stuck out a nice first class ticket. Was waiting, was hoping to enjoy that, and instead got to stand for how long was that? 3-4 hours on a train. While we slowly moved our way over to actually we had to switch trains. Actually, we had to go back to Brussels and get another train, and then it was just me and a bunch of people just standing, and just talking. I think that was actually a pretty fun experience. Just getting to know what people are about. It's interesting. I was talking to a lawyer from Luxembourg. He does a lot of business transactions for private equity and startups, VC and stuff. And yeah, it was interesting just getting his perspective on the business climate in Europe, which is pretty flat right now. Not much going on from what he was seeing. So hopefully it turns around. Europe's a great place, but yeah, the economy is definitely a bit in the dumps right now, but it seems like the US is the only bright spot I've seen in the world. But I guess we'll find out how much of that continues or gets better, in January when we get a new president in office. So other things in my mind, so I'm actually working on a couple articles right now. The first one we'll talk about today is the knowledge gap. And the second one, which I'll probably put out next week, is more about, just career transitions and kind of related matters. I'm often asked the question, now they stepped away from consulting, like what, am I scared that I'm going to just become another talking head making content and not being a practitioner? And I'll address that in this article, but the short answer is no. The long answer, you'll have to wait next week or maybe the week after. But the knowledge gap, this is something that I've seen. I think I started talking about this many years ago, and it's something I've seen for quite a while. It feels like we have a great ecosystem of tools and technologies, in data and software engineering and machine learning. I don't think there's any question that, no matter what type of problem you want to solve, there's very likely a tool that can do it. There's very likely a lot of tools that can do it. If you look at Matt Turk's Mad Data Landscape, there's, it's like you need the James Webb Telescope to see all the options you have, in different verticals and different use cases, right? Like at data observability, there's probably about, I don't know, many dozens, we'll say conservatively, of players in that space. And that's just one of them, right? And you kind of go into data quality, you get into data transformation, kind of ETL, ELT solutions, data warehouses, cloud data platforms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no option. There's no shortage of options. They're just, I think, amazing tools, and they're always getting better because that's what technology does, right? It always evolves to improve on itself to meet customer needs and meet new challenges. But what I see though is definitely a gap. If we're going to talk about data, there's a gap between, I would say, the potential that we can eke out of these tools and our knowledge and skills and capabilities of realizing that potential. I've actually seen a decline over the years in the general skills and knowledge and competencies of data practitioners. What do I mean by this? We're still grappling with the same problems we have for decades. Data often isn't believable. And it often doesn't add much value. This has always been the case, right? Sometimes it does add value, sometimes it is believable, and then in that case you win. Overwhelmingly, this is the struggle that data practitioners find themselves in. And I would say with the abundance of easy-to-use tools and technologies that make it easier and easier and easier to work with data, we're actually going backwards because we're compensating the ease of use of the tools with thinking we're doing the right thing and thinking we're being productive. But what I notice is we often do dumb things more quickly because we don't actually understand what it is we're doing in the first place. I'll let that sink in for a second. There's if you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't been trained in standard practices, then how would you know what to look for and how to operate as a professional, right? So you see this, a good example is data modeling, which I'm writing a book about right now. And what I often find is data modeling feels like it's gone backwards. Tools like dbt, SQL Mesh, et cetera, are amazing. But what I often find is that people who use these tools don't have a proper grasp on data modeling, right? So when we're talking about structured data, this is tabular data, rows and columns. The first thing I would expect is that you understand how to normalize data, i.e. the relational model, right? How do you, remove redundancies and dependencies in the data so each table can stand on its own, right? And be free of any update anomalies and so forth. That's the intention of the relational model. And until you understand proper relational modeling and normalization patterns, how would you know how to denormalize, right? Denormalizing follows normalization. It doesn't work the other way around. Unfortunately, what you see with a lot of data practitioners is they just jump, especially nowadays, they jump straight to one big table. I'm going to call it DBT for doing this in their education. They advocate one big table because, quote, it's a feeling that joins are bad. And they lead to bad performance of queries. I think this is absolute hogwash. What it also means is that you have an indecipherable mess of DBT models and an indecipherable mess in one big table. Like you can't reconcile it. And if you need to update things, you're probably going to have update issues. You're going to have duplicate data, all things that if you just understood basic normalization techniques, you could at least avoid and or reconcile and reason about it. But if you don't know what you're looking for, how would you know, right? And then obviously, the big one everyone talks about is, we'll just make a star schema out of this. Well, how many people have read Ralph Kimball's book, about dimensional modeling, and so forth, right? I wager to guess that a lot of practitioners have heard of star schemas and dimensional modeling. I would wager that very few have actually, read the book, opened it, or, and far less have probably read the whole thing. And this isn't meant to be a gatekeeping thing, but these are standard practices in the industry. These are the adopted practices, and to ignore them or pay lip service to them, I think is equivalent to professional malpractice. And the issue right now that I have is we have a lot of tools that allow us to work with data, and it's almost too easy now. But if you don't understand what it is you're trying to do, all you're going to do is produce things of lower quality. They're probably going to be very overcomplicated. They're going to lack, basic standardization. And these are big problems, right? And then I see companies that have, workflows in DBT that are like thousands, like DAGs that have like thousands of nodes, and it's just like, what's going on here? And this workflow, when you look at it, if you understood dimensional modeling, it would fix it once and for all, right? But this is the hard work, right? It means you understand the data. It means you are trying to tie together the concepts of your business, which is really what data modeling is about. And when you ask people about data modeling, and again, they'll say, like, well, I'm doing DBT models, right? And I guess it's a form of data modeling, but that's not really, quote, data modeling, right? And so this is an example of things I see. Like I feel like that, and if you look at data modeling again, the knowledge and standards that people had back in the day, it sort of disappeared. Like data modeling as a craft, it's become a lost craft. It's become a lost art. And so you have this new generation of, quote, analytics engineers that, in a lot of cases, I feel bad for them because they haven't been trained in the probably the right way to do things, right? And I think that they're being misinformed by vendors telling them that they should just throw everything into one big table. I mean, here's the deal: most data isn't big enough for it to really matter if you have joins or not. Jordan Tigani has been calling this out a lot with the guy. I think he's a founding engineer at BigQuery, and then he product manager at BigQuery. Now he runs MotherDuck. But he's been. I love what he's been saying. It's just that the amount of data that people query in analytics, it's often very, very small, right? You don't need. It doesn't need to be that complicated, right? And by complicated, I mean throw everything into one big table, which I argue is actually more complicated than if you took the time to reason about your data and model it dimensionally, or use something like Data Vault, or some sort of modeling approach. But when you use a modeling approach, now you have a standard approach, right? So now you have a way of talking about your data, not just from the entities and relationships and attributes in your data, or the facts and dimensions, but you have a shared vocabulary, right? So when I say that I'm doing a Kimball model, this introduces certain concepts, right? Facts and dimensions, maybe slowly changing dimensions, maybe conformed dimensions, maybe conformed measures, and so forth. But if you didn't have a shared vocabulary, right? If you throw everything to one big table, for example, or just a bunch of tables, or schema on read, what's the shared vocabulary of that modeling approach that you can communicate with others on your team or others outside of your team? You don't have it, right? All you have is just a pile of data that you now need to reconcile through. And I can argue most one big tables I've seen, you don't need them. They would be better off being dimensionally modeled, where there's a separation of concerns between the measures and the things that describe those measures and so forth. But again, because there's this feeling out there that joins are bad. Joining tables is, it leads to poor performance in queries. I would say you rarely run into the situation where that's going to matter anyway, right? If you're operating at a scale like Google, sure, yeah, throw everything to one big table because that's what they do. But they have a lot of data. Most companies don't. Most queries are in the hundreds of megabytes, maybe low gigs. It's not going to matter. You have enough processing power to throw out the problem. So I mean that's just one example, right? I'm not trying to pick on DBT or these companies, specifically. I think they're great. And again, they're just making tools that other people use. But I would say that, some of the education that I'm seeing vendors put forth is it's leading people down a bad path, I think. Right. And I think part of the knowledge gap is just people don't understand the options, right? The tribal knowledge, so to speak, is that, we need to go to use Kimball, right? But maybe that is the approach. Maybe it's not. But why would you choose Kimball, right? Why would you choose Data Vault? Why would you choose a relational model, right? Either third normal form or voice code normal form, especially if you're working in software applications, right? And even software, that's a big one where I see, the knowledge gap, and especially when you work with data. How many relational databases have you seen in the wild that don't have a relational data model, right? In that case, software engineers, I think, are as guilty as data practitioners in this way. It's especially with ORMs, object relational mappers, available in a lot of software frameworks like Rails, Django, and Hibernate, and so forth. It's super easy to just add fields in your code, to your model class, and then that gets proliferated down into new fields in your database tables, right? And pretty soon you just have a lot of duplicates. It's again, same indecipherable mess, in your application. And then the poor data analysts say downstream, I mean, they pull this data, they extract it, and then they have to make sense of your mess, and then it keeps going on and on and on and on. Another thing I see in software is, using stuff like Kubernetes when you probably don't even need to use it because you don't have a complicated workflow, right? Or Venkat Subramaniam, he had a really good thing on my podcast a while ago where he was talking about microservices and just how, he says, like, almost every company he sees, and Venkat, by the way, is he's one of the best enterprise architects on the planet, in my opinion. And he has a consultancy and does a lot of trainings, and he sees a lot of things. And he says, most everyone wants to do microservices. Most people don't know what they're doing when it comes to microservices. And more importantly, they probably don't need to do microservices, right? The monolith or modular monolith is probably good enough, right? But again, it's just, when people are trying to do microservices, they probably haven't taken the time to study how to properly do a microservice, or more importantly, ask the question, why do we need to do this in the first place? Oftentimes, the best answer to any architecture discussion is, let's not do it, right? But people want to stay busy, so but I just think you need to take the time to go back through and understand the first principles of your field, right? And again, back to data modeling is one of those first principles you need to understand. That's why I'm writing a book. I feel like data modeling, or I should say more importantly, the lack of data modeling, is one of the biggest symptoms of the problems I see, right? When you're talking about poor data quality, when you're talking about overly complicated data workflows, when you're talking about just duct taping and gluing data together because it hadn't been modeled upstream, and you're doing even a worse job modeling it downstream, well, what do you think is going to happen, right? But again, it's not like people are taking the time to take a step back and get perspective of what they're trying to do and improve their skills and knowledge. Instead, it's just worse because they're just diving right into it, saying, well, I don't have time to do things right. I need to get it done quickly. I don't have time to do things right, but I just want to get it done quickly. This is the biggest mistake I see, right? And I address this in my talks. Wrote about it recently, the quality paradox. It's a big thing. Take the time to do it right. This will reduce the number of errors and defects you have, which actually allows you to move faster, right? If you're constantly fighting fires, letting your pile of tech debt to keep accumulating and growing, this doesn't serve you anything, right? At some point, you're just going to burn it all down and start over. But it doesn't make you happy either. Do you really feel like you're doing the best work you can when you don't know what when I think everyone wants to do the right thing, right? But does it make you feel good when you're just building kind of a house of cards? I don't think that anyone feels good about that, or wants to call themselves a professional, or thinks that they're a professional when they do that. I mean, if you look at if that was your physician or your surgeon doing that, right? That would be scary, right? Like, but this is kind of how we look at data. It's like, okay, I'm gonna, we just throw people into the job. We don't give them any training. I know in a lot of even, masters of information systems or masters of business analytics, right? Like things like data warehousing, data modeling, it's sort of a second-class citizen. It's more about, let's just teach you how to use SQL and Python, teach you about the different databases, at least what they are, maybe not how they work internally, which I don't think is also a big mistake. Like, you should learn how do databases work at a fundamental level, right? Even if they, this is a bit obscured from you. But if you had a doctor like that, if that's how we train physicians in this country, where it's just like, just learn on the job. Heart surgery should be easy. We have great tools that can do it. That should scare you, right? I don't think that you'd want open heart surgery done on you from somebody who just kind of came out of a boot camp. It takes time, but invest in your knowledge, invest in your skills. Like, this is the number one thing you can do to, at least at a technical level, to keep growing. And this will set you apart from, I would say, the vast majority of people who don't do this. They just figure, I got a job. This is all I need to do. Just do the job as I've been taught. But how do you know the person teaching you also knows what they're doing, right? I think what I find often is it's a pretty crappy version of an apprenticeship, where there aren't standards, and we just sort of teach according to what we've been doing at this company, maybe not according to maybe more universal standards. Again, the standards in the industry are there, and they've been there for decades. Bill Inman's data warehouse, that's a standard approach, right? That came out, 89, 90? Kimball and dimensional modeling came out in 96, which I think is more kind of a, data mart modeling, so to speak. But again, dig into the classics. Get to know them, read, database books. Database Internals is a terrific book. Martin Kleppman's Designing Data Intensive Applications is a terrific book, for understanding systems at a fundamental level, distributed systems especially. Read my book, Fundamentals of Data Engineering, that I wrote with Matt Housley. That's a fantastic primer for data engineering, and to a lesser extent, analytics engineering, which I think is kind of a bullshit title, actually. I think that analytics engineering is just data engineering under a different name. But no matter what you want to call it, right, there are resources out there that are becoming, or are the reference materials. But we need a shared vocabulary, a shared way of operating. Otherwise, skills aren't transferable between companies, right? If you join a new company using the kind of bespoke techniques you learned at your last company, nobody's going to know what you're talking about, right? Then it's always a cold start problem all over the place. And again, we have this knowledge gap where we have these great tools. You're going to keep using them, but you'll have no idea what you're doing. So anyway, that's my rant. I probably keep going on about this, but just again, take the time to learn the skills, increase your competency, increase your knowledge. It's the biggest investment you can make. Anyway, I'm about to get back to writing, and I'm going to be, just stateside for a bit. I'm going to take a trip to Denver next week to go see Bill, but I'll be around. So anyway, more podcasts coming on a much more frequent basis. Again, if you want a discount on practical data modeling, the deal is good till December 4th. Go get it, 30% off forever. And I just hope you have a great weekend. Hope you recover from Thanksgiving if you're in the States. But anyway, it's great to hear from everybody. And just have a good one. Have a good weekend. Bye.